Egypt, land of the pharaohs, of pyramids and of mysterious colossal statues and vast ancient temples that are still unrivaled by anything that man has built since.
Look, quite honestly, this stuff isn't what interests me. I mean, these are just the funeral arrangements for some crazed megalomaniac who lived 3,000 years before they thought of cryogenic freezers. Look, turn the camera over there. Look, over there. Instead of looking at how the rich and powerful died, let's look at how the ordinary people lived 3,000 years ago. I get the impression that there's a lot going on in modern Egypt that would have been familiar to the ancient Egyptians who lived 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Well, this is my first visit to Egypt, and to show me around, I'm lucky enough to have a most untypical Egyptologist, Dr. Joanne Fletcher. And she tells me that one significant similarity between today and the times of the pharaohs is the spirit of cooperation.
Wherever you look in modern Egypt, whether it's in rural communities such as this or in urban environments, you see a great sense of teamwork. And if a job has to be done, then quite often there are a large group of people doing it.
Well, these people are doing it for free, they're just coming out?
Yeah, neighbours help each other. If you have a house to build, your neighbours will help you. And when your neighbour's building their house, you help them.
But surely this doesn't go for the building of the pyramids, for example?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The pyramid...
Come on.
No, truly, the pyramid actually embodies this ethos, very much so. It was very much a team effort.
From every corner of the land came teeming multitudes of workers, and then slaves and generations of slaves to wrest the rock from the unyielding earth, while armies of wretched humanity suffered and died to haul their colossal burden across the desert.
Some archaeologists are convinced that the men who built the pyramids were not slaves, but free men working in some sort of cooperative effort. So it may be that the image of ancient Egypt conjured up by Hollywood is based on a profound misunderstanding of how the ancient world worked. I mean, for goodness sake, they even went on strike in ancient Egypt. One lot of workers held a sit-in because they ran out of makeup. But we'll come back to that. This is Saqqara, to the south of modern Cairo. It may look like just a lot of desert, but it's actually an immense burial site of pyramids and tombs. You sometimes get the impression that the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with death. But this is actually just because of a quirk of fate. You see, only 5% of the land of Egypt is fertile, and they didn't want to waste that in the old days on graveyards. So they got in the habit of burying their dead out here in the desert. And it was the sand and the heat that preserved these tombs, almost as long as any other human artifact. But the ancient Egyptians weren't obsessed by death. If anything, they were obsessed by life. And so much so that they even recorded everyday speech. And that's what I'm going to find out now. What people were talking about at work 4,500 years ago. I'm told that in here is buried a top civil servant, a chap by the name of T. Actually, his nickname was T the Rich, and he owned vast estates. Well, on the walls in here, he had inscribed snatches of the conversations that he'd have heard as he walked around those estates.
Milk it! Hurry up! The herdsman's coming!
Hey, herdsman, Watch out for the crocodile. It lies in the water and comes unseen.
Don't make so much noise.
Oh, come on. Pay up. It's cheap.
Come and help me before he hits me.
Do we have to spend the whole day carrying barley?
Can't help feeling that he must have had some affection for his workers, at least enough to want to take their chatter with him into the next world. And I wonder how many modern works managers would want to do that. But did T and people like him care enough about his workers to treat them well in this world?
All of us know that anyone that carrying load or pulling load or pushing load may cause this very bad effect on the backbone, especially the backbone.
Dr. Azza Mohammed Sariel Din of the Human Genetics Department, National Research Centre, Cairo, explained to me that the workers who built the pyramids had a pretty hard life.
It is the lower part of the backbone of the vertebrae of one of the workers. His age was 35 years age. And you can see this, of course, it is not smooth as you see this bone. If we see this vertebra, we will find that it is tapered anteriorly, and this is not normal. This is also because of the compression of the load that he carrying heavy weights. Yes.
So there was plenty of backache in the.
Yes, of course, of course.
But however hard the work was, medical treatment was given to the privileged and unprivileged on an equal basis.
Here we have two bones of the upper arm. This is from the high officials.
Yeah.
This is the part
So
of the
holding the upper arm, or this
yes,
forearm
this part. Yes,
of
this
some
part.
high official. What would he be?
It was of a male. His age was about 35 to 40 years age.
But somehow, at some point, he broke his arm. Here.
Yes, and this is the same for another one, but from the workers. Yeah. And you can see the alignment here may be better than this, which means that they are treated in the same way. They use splints to fix the fracture for some time and until it healed.
Yes, and the workers' splint must have done a better job than that.
Yes.
But what was it like to be an ordinary Egyptian living 3,000, 4,000 years ago? How can we get any idea of daily life so long ago? Well, here in Luxor, almost 500 miles from Cairo, Joanne is taking me to the tomb of a craftsman called Sennacherib.
Watch your head, Terry, it's quite low down.
Wow.
This is someone I wanted to show you, Terry. This is Sennacherib, a workman.
Okay, it looks like a farm worker, isn't he?
Well, actually, what it shows is Sennacherib, the worker, followed by his wife, Nefertiti, and they're showing themselves during the afterlife. This is a scene of the afterlife, and this is how they imagined it, an eternal round of ploughing, reaping and sowing in the fields of the blessed. They have now achieved paradise.
He's reaping the corn here, and it's very high, it looks like the corn. It's as tall as he is.
Well, that was how they viewed the afterlife. Yeah. Corn would grow to at least 6 feet high. There'd be no pests in the field, no insect pests or anything. It would be bliss.
So this man, he was just a farmer, a farm worker, was he?
Well, he was actually an artisan, a craftsman, a painter of immense skill that worked in the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings.
So he'd be doing things like what, painting the mum and the coffins and things.
Yeah,
like that.
And also painting the scenes in the royal tombs.
Oh wow!
Isn't it a great view? See all the village.
So this is Sennacherib's village?
Yes, Sennacherib would have lived here in the bottom right-hand corner, actually. That's his house. Well, this is the village of Deir el-Medina, and these remains are the homes of the workmen that actually built and decorated the tombs in the Valley of the Kings.
So what kind of workmen are these?
Well, the very highly skilled individuals, a professional class of artisans, painters, scribes. So here we are, Terry. This is the actual front door of Sennacherib.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
So what would it have looked like?
Well, it would have been wood, painted red.
Yeah.
and the outside walls sort of plastered and painted white. So it would have been a very smart.
Would it have had a number on it or anything? Saying
probably his
Synergy?
name, yeah. So the postman would know where to go.
See if he's in. Hello. I don't think he's there. No, I think he's somewhere else. I don't know where.
But this is the front reception room.
Right. You sure this room isn't the forerunner of that dreaded thing, the front room that no one uses?
Oh yeah, this is the front parlour. Always kept immaculate, I think.
Oh, now this feels like a more lived-in sort of room. I don't know why.
Certainly
Maybe it's
is.
square.
Well, this is a stone plinth on which the sort of central column holding the house.
Not a
would
coffee
have been.
table.
No, I mean, an attractive idea. And then here we have a feature that you can see in almost every Egyptian home, certainly in the rural areas, another mud brick kind of bench shape on which there would have been cushions. The Egyptians were big on feather-filled cushions for comfort, you know, you sort of wanted to be comfortable when you were reclining. And here the family would sit and chat, gossip, play games perhaps.
And would they be decorated on the walls?
Oh, certainly, yeah. We know that the walls would originally have been plastered over. Some of the houses retained some of the colour, kind of ochres and reds, and they really went in for fairly bright colours, the similar colours that we saw in the tomb earlier.
And what are the other rooms then?
Well, we go through here into a storage area, basically, and the pit you can see is one of the areas in which they would have stored food. There's a similar structure on the other side of the wall, and you could have placed the large sort of terracotta pots in there to keep various things cool. There are the fragments of a terracotta pot, very thick, would have kept the contents cool. No doubt the water storage areas.
Yeah.
And these could, again,
would it be filled in the pit? Do you think? I mean, would you have the? I mean, how do you keep those pots upright?
Probably it would have had a sandy base, and then the pots could have been stood in that, or maybe in some form of container. But again, with this enclosed, it would have kept the contents shaded and cool at all times.
So that's the cool cellar.
That's the sort of refrigerator.
So is that going up to the upper storey? I mean,
they would have gone right up to the roof.
The bedrooms, or?
Well, they did actually sleep on the roof, as they do today in parts of modern
those
Egypt.
Stairs are 4,000 years old, aren't they?
It's incredible, isn't it?
But still functioning.
The sleeping arrangements would have been rather ad hoc because some people would have slept on the benches or on mats on the floor, and then in summer certainly they would have slept on the roof.
Looking down from a balloon, it seems not that much has changed. People today still sleep on the rooftops under the stars, just as they did in ancient Egypt. Oh, there's Sennacherib. Joanne is a great enthusiast for the Egyptian way of life, past and present. In fact, she's been adopted by an Egyptian family, the Shebas, and she's taken me round to their new home. I'm wondering if it'll give me any idea of how Sennacherib lived.
So this is the best room that nobody uses, eh?
Yeah, this is the front parlour just for visitors and special guests. Tisbelke?
Hey, everyone.
This is the family. Wonderful family.
And I mean, the furniture is basically the kind of furniture not very different from the furniture that you've had.
Absolutely. I mean, totally comparable. I mean, these kind of low benches, either in wood or in mud brick, and then kind of padded out with cushions. I mean, the Egyptians have always liked sort of comfort, and these plump cushions have been found in pharaonic tombs.
And so you might sleep up here, huh?
You could sleep up there, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and it's beautiful. Oh, the wind is blowing in my face.
There's a central column, exactly as it was, holding up the roof. If you look at the roof structure, we'll get a good idea of how the roofs originally were at Deir el-Medina, with the palm fronds going one way and then the wooden beams the other way.
And half this room covered over and half it open to the sky.
Yeah, because of course it never rains. Yeah. And these inner rooms that we can see here, again, very, very simply furnished, and the two bedrooms leading off. Mats on the floor. A few of them have beds, but by and large the family tend to sleep on the floor on these low benches.
Yes.
The artists, craftsmen, stoneworkers and carpenters who decorated the tombs of the pharaohs included images from their own everyday life in their work. Tomb workers like Senejem built their own tombs and decorated them in their spare time. Funny sort of hobby, but still. But these do-it-yourself tombs have left us with wonderful images of everyday life in the ancient world.
Woodworking, is that?
Yeah, woodworking too. Can you see the guy using the saw to saw through that plank?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a guy with an axe next to him.
Yeah.
He's not standing too close.
Yeah.
And all these guys are making wooden furniture.
Yeah.
There's some guys making bed legs at the top, making chairs. And then this wonderful creation here.
It's a Welsh dresser.
But this scaffolding is fantastic. It really is.
Smile there.
Yeah. This guy's holding onto the side of the scaffolding while he's reaching up, possibly with a stone pounder, which we use to sort of even away the surface.
So this is the brickworks there.
Breaking up the mud there, and then the guy above is actually fashioning it into mud bricks with the little wooden mud brick maker.
Oh, bellows! Oh, he's pumping.
He's pumping the fire.
He's holding string to bring them up.
Yeah, and they're getting the temperature of the fire, and then the smelting metal.
They've got a couple of guys with bellows.
The craftsmen and engineers who worked for the pharaohs could expect quite a few perks and benefits. In fact, one works manager here in Deir el-Medina actually recorded the reasons why some of his workmen had taken time off. One had been ill, fair enough. Another had been sacrificing to the god. Not sure whether he'd get away with that nowadays. Another one had been having a row with his wife. Another was building his house, and another one had been bitten by a scorpion. Oh, and one fellow had taken time off to brew some beer, and what's more, to drink it. So it wasn't all bad working for the pharaohs. At a street market in Cairo, Joanne tells me more about her favourite subject of mine. Beer.
Beer was drunk by everyone, men, women, children. It was a bit thick, a bit soupy, so they had to use
What's it a bit thick? I mean, how do you mean? I mean, sort of like...
Well, they made it with barley and bread and all kinds of things, and it kind of had a bit of a sediment. A bit, it's a bit...
I mean, but more than like real beer has now in England. I mean, our real beer has sediment. A good beer should have a sediment.
Yeah, but this was just like vegetable soup. I mean, there were things floating in it, for goodness sake. So they had to sieve it or use a kind of special sieve straw. And the wealthy drank wine, of course. I mean, for instance, Tutankhamun, we know from his tomb goods, he preferred white wine.
Really?
Fairly dry white wine.
So Tutankhamun liked white wine. The ancient Egyptians loved their wine and beer. But there was another liquid that was even more important. Egypt is unlike any other country. Its people and its history are unique. And that uniqueness is based on this river. Egypt was, and Egypt is, the River Nile. But oddly enough, the thing that the ancient Egyptians particularly liked about the Nile was that it was prone to flooding. The first proper guidebook description of Egypt was written by the Greek Herodotus.
When the Nile inundates the land, all of Egypt becomes a sea, and only the towns remain above water, like islands. At such times, shipping no longer follows the stream, but goes straight across the country. For example, sailing right alongside the pyramids.
The reason why the flooding of the Nile was so important is that it brought silt down from Ethiopia and Uganda. This rich mud made all the difference between the fertile land and the barren desert. In fact, the ancient Egyptians were so fond of this mud, they actually named their country after it. They called it Kemet, or Black Land.
And the land that wasn't touched by the annual flood they called the Red Land, or Deshret, from which we get our English word desert. This reliance on what most people would regard as a natural disaster gave the ancient Egyptians a special sense of values that in some ways is the inverse of our own. For example, property was valued according to how liable it was to flooding, whether it always flooded, sometimes flooded, or never flooded. And black became the symbol of life, and white the symbol of death, mourning.
It's a fair bet that Sennacherib and his wife felt themselves a part of this natural cycle of fertility. Survival may have been hard work, but it wasn't exactly a struggle. The gods themselves had designed the world to be kind to them at the beginning of time. And when life is good, and when the gods have been so generous, why change things? Any closer to Sennacherib? What was it like to be in his shoes, or at least in his clothes?
Well, it just so happens that Joe has got a pattern book that can help us, haven't you, Joe?
Yeah, and we need to take it to the cloth shop first.
Okay. Well, tell us what the pattern book is.
Well, it was put together by a textile expert who's been examining for many years the actual clothing of the ancient Egyptians, how they were made and constructed.
Hello.
Hello. Could we see some material? ممكن نشوف هناك?
So what are we looking for, Joe?
We're looking for something fine white linen, creamy white linen that would have made something like this.
Yeah.
A kind of large overshirt, almost.
Now, did they wear the lighter cloth? Would that be because they could have lots of different garments like this? Whereas the poorer you were, you'd have only one garment or something. You'd have a heavy one that would last.
Very much so. I mean, the loincloths of the workers were generally coarser linen and, you know, a couple of changes of loincloth, and that was really it for the vast majority.
Very good.
Breathe in.
Great.
We need to make this ancient Egyptian garment, which is very, very simple. It's just a single piece of cloth. It has to fit terry.
What would I be wearing? Anything underneath?
And the underneath.
Funny you should mention that, Terry. I've got an ancient Egyptian pattern for loincloths.
A loincloth?
Ancient underpants.
I don't have to be fitted for that, do I?
No.
See the ancient Egyptian loincloth design.
Oh yes, there it is.
Oh, well, that's
There were some fantastic examples found at the workmen's village as well.
Those are just exactly like, you know, two robbers.
Sort of split crotches, I don't know.
No, it was sewn down the middle.
Oh, good.
While my tailor gets busy with my new outfit, Joanne and I head back to the village of Gurna, just outside the Valley of the Kings, to investigate another vital element of daily life in ancient Egypt. Sennacherib has had a hard morning. He's been painting inside the pharaoh's tomb in 100-degree heat, but now it's lunchtime. So what would he eat?
Of course, this was a staple of an ancient Egyptian diet as well, the beer and the bread. This is a typical ancient Egyptian meal. Their entire culture was based on the 2 ingredients we see on the table now. I mean, it's absolutely laden with calories. It really will pile the
It's a bit
pounds
like a
on.
paratha. It's quite greasy and...
It is. But the beauty of it is, I mean, it is so high calorie, it would give an amazing amount of energy, which is... It's good, isn't it?
No, it doesn't taste like paratha. It's lighter. I mean, you don't need to eat anything else than this. It's just delicious.
Well, this is the kind of stuff that the pyramids were basically built on, and recent excavations at Giza at the pyramid builders' village have found the huge bakeries which supplied the needs of the pyramid
These were the
builders.
foundations for those
Absolutely.
huge pyramids.
I mean, the loaves that were made in kind of almost terracotta plant pots were such high-calorie, dense loaves that they would have given all the energy necessary to build a pyramid.
I mean, when people hear, modern people think about the ancient Egyptians living on bread and beer, they think, oh, poor things. But, of course, they're thinking about sliced bread in the supermarket.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different thing. There's taste, there's so many different kinds.
Today, in parts of rural Egypt, each lady has her own little oven outside the house, and they all make their own particular shapes, and sometimes with these kind of lumps, 3 lumps on the side, and sometimes with like little marks of decoration. And there's great rivalry amongst them sometimes as to who makes the best bread.
But I'm sure I've seen these in hieroglyphs. I've seen this shape on a...
You've seen them on tomb and temple walls as offerings. I mean, these things have been going for thousands of years.
I guess the onion and everything would have been chopped up and made into salad with these...
And quite possibly made into a sandwich. A piece of bread, you scatter the onions on anything else, roll it up, quite possibly stick it in your back pocket and take it off to work for later in the day.
So after the salad course, what would we have then?
After the salad, well, if you were a quite wealthy Egyptian or you'd been lucky that day hunting in the hunting down by the river, wildfowl, ducks and geese. Absolutely fantastic.
No, they wouldn't have had duck.
They would have had duck, and they like to cook it. They like to have crispy roast duck basted in honey. And you even see the textures in tomb scenes. You can see the skin of the duck, the way it's kind of been plucked. That is something the ancient artists went to great lengths to show that the meat had been prepared. And apart from roast duck, the Egyptians often prepared their meat and salted it, and then hung it up to dry. The butcher's shop's empty, but can you see the hooks that are hanging from the ceiling?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of tomb scenes and temple scenes show butchery and sort of the places where animals were slaughtered and the way that meat was dried up, and quite often fish was dried up to hang there to dry, sort of ancient kippers, if you like. They were really big on things like that.
The dried fish was quite a...
Oh, yeah, definitely.
3,000 to 4,000 years ago, ordinary Egyptians lived lives as full and rich as they do today. They also had experts and technicians just as skilled as today's. In fact, the ancient engineers could have taught today's a trick or two. In the mid-20th century, the Egyptian government decided to build a dam to control the flooding of the Nile. The dam promised to bring all sorts of advantages to the modern world. The snag was that it would create a huge lake exactly where one of the greatest monuments of the ancient world stood, the great temple built by the pharaoh Ramesses II in the 13th century BC at Abu Simbel. So, in the 1960s, the United Nations organized the rescue of the temple by chopping it up into bits and moving it to the top of the cliff. However, deep inside the temple sits a row of gods. At the original site, the temple had been carefully aligned so that twice each year, on February the 23rd and October the 23rd, the rays from the rising sun bathed the statues of 3 of the gods in light. The modern engineers tried to reproduce this effect, but they got it wrong. The ancient engineers knew what they were doing. Life in Egypt enjoys a quite extraordinary continuity with the past, but that doesn't mean there haven't been huge changes. There have. In the year 391 AD, the Roman Emperor Theodosius issued a decree banning all pagan temples throughout the empire.
Well, for the Egyptians, this was a disaster. For their temples weren't just places of worship. They were schools, they were universities, they were libraries, they were medical centres, they were law courts. They were the centre of civic life. Closing them down spelt the official end of the old ways and the end of the written language. And a few centuries later, the coming of another religion, Islam, spelt the end of the spoken language. However, the language of ancient Egypt was still being spoken, and it still is.
For 1600 years, despite frequent official repression, the Coptic Church and priests like Father Isaac Ramsey have kept alive the Coptic language.
Coptic is a derivative of the ancient Egyptian language.
So you're actually speaking the language that was spoken by the pharaohs?
Yes.
It may be that the way Coptic is being spoken here bears as little resemblance to the way it was spoken in the ancient world as modern English does to Anglo-Saxon. But nevertheless, the Christian Coptic Church was keeping this dead language alive in the same way that the Roman Catholic Church was keeping Latin alive. And the world's earliest recorded script was still being spoken. And it was this realization that was crucial to cracking the meaning of the hieroglyphs. So here we are, listening to the language of the pharaohs and able to read their scripts. What words of wisdom, what secrets and mysteries are they handing down to us through the millennia?
On this day, the following clothes were given to the laundrymen: 10 kilts, 8 loincloths, and 5 sanitary towels.
Actually, the word hieroglyph is a bit of a misnomer. You see, when the ancient Greeks first came across these mystical writings on the Egyptians' tombs and temples, they naturally assumed they were full of mystical significance. So they called them hieroglyphs, or sacred carvings. But in fact, a lot of them were far from mystical, and they weren't all just carved on temple walls. The Egyptians invented the first paper. They used the inside of the reed known as the papyrus, and that's where we get the name paper from. And this was what they used for official documents and for archiving. But for everyday notes and messages, there was a much cheaper version at hand, or rather at foot. They had bits of broken pottery or shards of limestone. And this is what they scribbled their messages on. But for this, they developed a kind of shorthand version of the hieroglyph, which is known as hieratic.
Is somebody writing something down here?
He's reading out from a papyrus with the text, the ritual text on, reading out over the ritual implements, which were used at the funeral and standing on this small black, almost like a coffee table.
The papyrus is painted white, isn't it? Like?
Yeah. To just kind of give the kind of idea of pristine, shiny new whiteness. It's a new piece of papyrus.
Papyrus grew in abundance alongside the Nile, and someone worked out that by cutting it up, rolling it out and soaking it, interleaving it and then pressing it, you could produce something you could write on. The invention of writing in ancient Egypt was, of course, a boon for the accountants and managers and scribes, but it also made possible the world's first literature. One of Sennacherib's neighbours built up a small library of novellas, mythical stories, and even love songs.
The woman I love is on the other side. There's the river between our bodies. The river is high. It is the time of flood. And there's a crocodile lurking in the shallows. I step in. I brave the wave. Mr. Crocodile, you're just a mouse, and I can walk on water. It is the power of love.
Another literary genre which the ancient Egyptians seem to have instigated is the autobiography. Of course, theirs tended to be written in stone. Here, for example, a man named Ahmose tells how he worked his way up from nothing to become a fully paid-up member of the nouveau riche.
I grew up in the town of Neheb. My father was a soldier of the king. I took service as a soldier in his stead on the ship the Wild Bull in the time of Ahmose, when I was young and had not taken a wife. And I carried off a man as a living captive. I went down into the water, for he was captured on the city side, and crossed the water carrying him. When it was reported to the Royal Herald, I was rewarded with gold once more. I am grown infirm. I have reached old age. I rest in the tomb which I made myself, that I may let you know the favors which have come to me. I have been awarded gold 7 times in the presence of the entire land, and male and female slaves in like manner, and I have been vested with very many fields. The name of a valiant man resides in that which he has done.
Well, all very well for the valiant man, but what about the valiant woman? Well, I was surprised to learn that in ancient Egypt, women were legally on an equal footing with men. What's more, they could marry, they could get divorced, they could buy and sell property, and they were entitled to receive the same wages as men, something the modern world is still struggling to achieve. One text even warns men against blokish behaviour as a cause of domestic rows.
Do not control your wife in her house when you know she is efficient. Don't say to her, "Where is it? Get it," when she has put it in the right place. Let your eye observe in silence, then you recognize her skill. If a man desists from strife at home, it will never start.
In ancient Egypt, a balance between the sexes was all part of the balance of life in general. Here in Luxor, it's hot, often over 40 degrees centigrade, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. No wonder the ancient Egyptians needed the odd shower. This is what an ancient Egyptian shower would have looked like. Of course, it's a bit of a classy one because it belonged to Ramesses III. But it's extraordinary to think that the pharaoh Ramesses III actually stood on this spot and took a shower. And what would happen is his servants would stand on the walls and pour water at me. "Thank you, servant, very good." And then after the shower, he'd dry himself on one of these. A nice fluffy towel. These things haven't changed in 3,000 years. I suppose it's a bit like us human beings, really. As the centuries roll by, we don't become cleverer or more moral or get bigger brains. I suppose it's quite comforting to think that, really, we're all just like fluffy towels, really.
Hope he's finished it.
Freshly laundered, I return to my tailor to collect my brand new ancient Egyptian outfit.
There it goes.
Looks so.
Good, Ben.
Well, do you want to try it on?
Well, better. We look a bit silly if we...
Yeah. If it didn't fit.
This is changing room here, is it?
Oh, yeah, why not?
Yeah, right, okay.
Oh, beautiful.
Nice to keep my tummy in, is that?
Yeah.
Great.
That should be fine.
It's nice to fit in a bit more with the local population.
Isn't it blending?
So that's going around there like that.
Oh, just the job.
Yeah. Oh, I can't quite get around to do it up there, but I think that'll be fine. Oh, sugar.
Thanks.
So? Very good. I always wear socks in Egypt. It's the cool and a good woolen sock. It's very necessary for the midday sun.
Well, I'm not exactly inside Sennagem's skin, but at least I'm in his clothes. The one thing that Sennajem would not be seen in public without is makeup. You see, makeup was an essential tool for the ordinary person 4,000 years ago. And again, there was equality amongst the sexes. Men wore makeup as well as women.
This brings me back to the strike of workers I mentioned earlier. It happened one day in 1170 BC. Some workers on a tomb in the Valley of the Kings went on strike because they ran out of makeup. They claimed they wanted more moisturising oil and clothes and vegetables and fish. The local bureaucrats tried to persuade them to go back to work, but no dice, and the workers held a peaceful sit-in here in this temple. Eventually, they were offered a month's worth of supplies, but that still wasn't good enough, and they stuck the sit-in out until they were offered 2 months of makeup and food.
So now, why did the men put this stuff on their eyes?
Well, it can be compared to kind of like American footballers who wear the black stripes under the eyes to sort of reduce the glare of the sun from the pitch. It's exactly the same in ancient Egypt. I mean, you know how warm it is here, how hot, and the sun blazing down on the desert, on the rocks. So for those outside undertaking manual labour, they would have needed something to very much reduce the glare of the sun. So it's kind of like ancient Egyptian sunglasses, really.
So on my face as a worker, I would have some moisturising oil.
Lots of moisturiser, yeah, all over your skin, possibly perfumed, and then the eyes made up.
Yeah. And it's very weird, isn't it, think of these manual labourers going off to work with their sandwiches and their makeup box.
Absolutely.
But there is a picture of somebody doing it for somebody while he's on the job, isn't there?
Yeah, in the Tomb of the Workman Ippy, there's a scene of Ippy's colleagues hard at work, and then there's a guy going around actually applying this stuff to them as they're actually in the process of working.
So now, I mean, I would have been bald. I mean...
Well, the ancients used to shave the hair off or crop it very short to prevent head lice, which were very common when it was, you know, in hot, dry weather. That the wealthy certainly would have worn a wig, and so if we flatten your hair down now using a kind of gel, I mean, in the ancient times they used a mixture of resin or wax or fat. In fact, some of the ancient recipes say hedgehog fat was used to cure baldness.
Really?
And their wigs with henna.
Oh, right, yes.
In some of the excavations we've done, we found henna was used as a hair dye as early as 3,400 BC.
But to dye the wigs, not the hair?
They dyed both. Oh, that's lovely.
I hate to say this, Joe, but were wigs regarded as particularly attractive? Or
oh, yeah, they weren't just items of status, but they were seen as very, very attractive. And there's one brilliant story where a man makes a very improper suggestion to a woman and said, put your wig on and let us spend an hour in bed. I mean, this was the height of impropriety.
A bit more like it. How did they put the perfume on in the old days?
Well, literally douse it all over themselves. They'd rub it into their skin.
I think I'll douse it, yes, I think. Is that more phonic?
Very much. Oh, you smell beautiful.
Do I? Well, I know, I feel like a knight on the town.
shirking going on here. Back to work, please.
The protection offered by eye makeup was not simply practical, it was also mystical. You see, the eye, or to be precise, the Eye of Horus, possessed for the ancient Egyptians magical powers of protection against evil. You still see it today. But of course, the ancient Egyptians also took practical steps to protect themselves as well. Drugs and herbal medicines were on sale in every marketplace. In fact, the ancient Egyptians invented toothpaste, the first cough drops, breath fresheners, chewing gum, and deodorants. But even the Eye of Horus couldn't protect the ancients from the ever-present spectre of death, and children were especially vulnerable.
Come on out, visitor from the darkness, who crawls along with its nose and face on the back of its head. Have you come to kiss this child? I will not let you. Have you come to do it harm? I will not let you. I have made a potion to protect it from you, out of garlic, which is bad for you, from honey, which is sweet for the living and bitter for the dead.
Death in ancient Egypt was as much a business as it is today, and of course there was money to be made out of it. These women, for example, were professional mourners, and here they're training up their young apprentices to weep and wail and tear their hair. Archaeologists have also revealed sharp practice in the ancient Egyptian undertaking business. Mummies have been found stuffed with twigs and grass, even an old broom handle. But in any case, the ancients weren't all as confident in the afterlife as we may like to imagine. A blind harpist from 4,000 years ago warns us,
"Party while you can, don't let up. Look, no man can ever take his goods with him. See, no one who goes ever comes back."
Well, the great rulers have passed away. Their tombs have been robbed or rediscovered, their mummies unwrapped and the broom handles removed. The all-powerful pharaohs have been made public property. But perhaps the real immortality is to be found among ordinary men and women, living lives that have changed very little since the days of the pharaohs. Perhaps the hidden history of ancient Egypt has been here all along, under our noses. For the ancient Egyptians living here in Thebes, it was a small world. From the Nile to those mountains over there. And beyond was the desert, the other world, the dwelling of the dead. It wasn't that they were obsessed with death, it was just that death was their next-door neighbour, and they'd learned to live with it. Here's a favourite message from the living to the dead. May you spend millions of years, you lover of Thebes, with your face to the north wind and your eyes beholding happiness. And the dead also have a message for the living. Here's an ancient Egyptian's advice to us today. Be merry all your life. Toil no more than is required, nor cut short the time allotted to pleasure. Don't waste time on daily cares beyond providing for your household, and when wealth has come, follow your heart. Wealth does no good if you're glum. When they thought about the afterworld, they saw it as very much like this one. Because you see, for the ancient Egyptians, heaven was Egypt, and hell was to be anywhere else. I wonder how many people living today in Los Angeles or London could say the same.